Hello, welcome to PM Express tonight. My name is Evans Mensah. Tonight, 1D, 1F, one district, one factory. Dream or reality? Yesterday, we promised to have a conversation about this. And today, this man, who was on our show yesterday, held a press conference to brief the country about where they are in achieving this promise they made during the 2016 elections. In fact, it was in their manifesto, the main vehicle through which the NPP promised to deliver jobs. Well, 20 months into the administration, where is the government in realizing this dream? Is it a reality yet? Well, listen to the man himself addressing the press today.
Our principal job creation path, however, remains to fully execute our programs that are aimed at stimulating the creation of more economic activity and jobs, particularly in the private sector, including the One District, One Factory program. And that will move me to item number 2, which is a quick update on the One District, One Factory program. The One District, One Factory program is a program that aims at developing industries in the districts of this country, at least starting with a factory in each district. It is a paradigm that seeks to create jobs at the local level and to bring with it the many benefits, including jobs, incomes, and local development. Now, for the avoidance of doubt, the NPP's commitment is on page 43 of the party's manifesto, and I just want to quote it so that we know the premise on which we are working. And the premise is that in collaboration with the private sector, the NPP will implement the One District, One Factory initiative. The district industrialization program will ensure an even spatial spread of industries. Sometimes we come across people who make the argument that the NPP said it will build factories in all of these districts, but our manifesto commitment is clear for the avoidance of doubt. It must be stated that government has not said that it will or the state will build these factories on its own. We have insisted consistently that we will work with the private sector, we'll collaborate with the private sector, we'll facilitate the work of the private sector in building these factories. This is a quick status report. As I speak to you this morning, 18 factories have been accredited so far, and a good number of them have been visited by President Akufo-Addo. Many of you have covered it extensively. You've shown the footage on television and on your social media handles. For the avoidance of doubt, we will be uploading some of those videos on the Ministry of Information's social media handles after this presentation, so that you can also show to your audiences out there some of these first 18 that have been accredited so far. An additional 50 are expected to be accredited before the end of this year. And this should bring to almost 70 the 1D, 1F projects by the end of this year, 2018. Now, the One District, One Factory initiative has already seen, as part of government's facilitation efforts, has already seen about 10 financial institutions committing close to about 4.5 billion Ghana cedis in loanable funds to prospective venture capitalists. And there's a quick breakdown of some of the facilitation that has been aided by government so far. Ghana Commercial Bank, about 1 billion Ghana cedis. Universal Merchant Bank, about 440 million Ghana cedis. The United Bank for Africa, about 880 million Ghana cedis. ADB, about 200 million Ghana cedis. Exim Bank, about 1.7 billion Ghana cedis. EcoBank, about 150 million Ghana cedis. So as I mentioned, so far, about 18 accredited so far. We expect to do about 50 more before the end of the year, and that should bring us to about 70 accredited before the end of this year. That's a quick status update on the 1D, 1F program.
So that is the information minister speaking today at the press briefing. And let's break down the numbers for you. He says, he uses the word accreditation. Now, that is a word that many are scratching their heads to understand within the context of these factories that were promised. What exactly does that mean, accreditation? You see 3 significant question marks here. What exactly does accreditation mean? Well, we don't have the answers yet to that, but we can break it down further. Just pictorially, as far as the numbers are concerned. He says 18 factories have so far been accredited. Doesn't mean that 18 factories have so far been formally accepted by the government to be rolled out. That is one of those vague areas that we need to explore. 18 factories so far accredited. 50 more factories by the end of the year will be accredited. So in total, we are talking about, by the end of the year, we're going to have 68 factories. 68 factories accredited by the end of the year. The question is, how many of these factories will actually start producing something? That is a key question by the end of the year. And it comes back to the question I asked about accreditation. How many of these 68 by the end of the year will actually start producing something? Now, this is important here. Remember that we have 216 districts across the country. The promise was we're going to build one factory in one district. 1D, 1F. One district, one factory. That is the basic promise in 4 years. Now, if you take 216 factories, 216 districts, with 68 factories accredited by the end of the year, government will still be left with 148 districts left to go. Now, that is a significant number still undone by the end of the year. Now, that is why we asked the question. If we look at 68, government has taken 2 years to accredit 68 factories. What it means is, if you're doing the calculation in the maths, 5 more years to have it in all the districts. If you do the calculations, if you're taking 2 years to accredit 68 factories, you need just about 5 more years to do in all, to have factories in all 216 districts across the country. That in itself, assuming that we are going at the same rate, by the way, will overshoot their own target by a significant number of years, 3 years in the least. So, how much is available to government? Even that, we are talking about pledges, loanable funds pledged so far by the banks. Well, today we got a briefing and we are told that 4.43 billion cedis have so far been pledged by the banks. That is the figure here. 4.43 billion cedis so far pledged by the banks to facilitate the establishment of these factories across the districts in the country. Now, if that is the case, it raises the question, are these funds, what is the criteria for accessing these funds? It's something else that we need to think about. But government has 2 more years to run out of time on this one before the 2016 elections. Can it meet its own timeline of delivering 216 factories in every district across the country by, say, December 2020? That's the question that will be interrogated. And today, we're going to be speaking to civil society. They've been scrutinizing the numbers just as we've done. We will hear from the minority. They've been scrutinizing the numbers such as you've heard. We will talk to the Association of Ghana Industries, also looking at this. Because remember, this is where the jobs really lie. Stay with us here on PM Express. So today we will go live shortly and we'll be speaking to Fifi Kwete, who, by the way, he is a minority spokesperson on industry. He is the ranking member on the committee as far as industry is concerned in Parliament. He's going to join us on live link from his home tonight. We'll also be on the line via Skype to, of course, the man who has written a piece on this already, analyzing what he's had today. I'm talking about Imani's president, that is Franklin Kujo. He's been looking at the figures today, and he has something to say about this, and that is why we have him on Skype joining us today. I want to quickly share with you what he's been talking about today as far as the analysis that we put out is concerned. And this is Franklin Kujo's thoughts on what we heard today. He says, folks, the MPP is right. It did say it will implement the one district, one factory with the help of the private sector. He says, now the government says 18 of these factories have been accredited by government, and that by the end of the year, 70 of these accredited factories will be ready. It's not exactly 70. To put the maths to it, it's 68, as we've illustrated on our graph earlier. It says, I don't understand what accreditation means, and that is one of the big things. Accreditation is a key thing. What it means here. Perhaps a little explanation will help. In any case, a promise was made that by the end of 2017, 51 of these factories would have been ready, not accredited. So he's creating a clear distinction between accreditation and ready. And that's a question we asked, whether accreditation means ready and how many of these factories will actually be producing something by the end of the year. He says the promise was make it ready and not accredited. They also said by June 2017, 10 factories were going to be launched by the president. They never became. Now, these vanishing dreams, he describes it as, reminds me of the past NDC government when in a single week they announced different completion rates for the Atuabo gas project, 60%, 75%, 90%. They never were, he says. Now, he says that, again today, one other update we crucially need to hear government provide is the 750,000 jobs apparently created in the agri sector. Although the government in the 2017 budget projected about 750 jobs will be created under the Planting for Foods and Jobs program. Now, the 2018 budget provided no details on the number of jobs. He says, my advice to all politicians, please simply get on with it instead of announcing numbers as though you are betting on the wheels of fortune. Human lives, he says, matter. They are not lotto numbers. And he greets us with a good evening. Do we have him on the line? We're going to go live right now and speak to Franklin Kujo, who's joining us via Skype. We'll also be speaking shortly with Fifi Kwete here on PM Express. Hello, Mr. Kwete.
Hi, Evans. Good evening to you and to all your many viewers.
Nice to have you join us on PM Express tonight. You watched the briefing today. First of all, give me your impression. And I know you've had briefings. Let me clarify that. Have you had any briefing as far as the Committee on Trade is concerned on this at the parliamentary level?
Let's just see that we, sometime last year, had an interaction with the Ministry of Trade and Industry. And in that interaction, basically, I would say they tried to explain what this whole project is about. But let me just say that we were not clearer at the end of the interaction than it was at the beginning of it. And listening again today, I'm still in a quandary as to exactly what they really aim to achieve. And that is the first concern I want to express, that this whole thing still pretty much appears to be a situation of shooting first and aiming second.
So,
you know, I mean, they shot first and later now realize that they now have to literally run after the bullets, take hold of the bullet, and now try to see whether they can guide the bullet where it's supposed to go. And it's looking very much like a government that clearly has beaten more than it can chew.
Let's settle on today's details that we heard. What struck you about today? We got some numbers and we've just illustrated it for our viewers. We're told today that 18 of these factories have so far been accredited. They're expecting that about 50 more will be accredited by the end of the year. That should put the total number of accredited factories at 68, to be very specific, by the end of the year. And by our calculations, if you are going by this rate, say 2 years, you've done 68 accredited factories, you probably would need 5 more years to have it in all 216 districts across the country. Did you get clarity on what accreditation exactly means?
I'm more confused than you are. What it is. I mean, what does that really mean? I don't understand it. And I wish maybe you in the media had asked them to explain exactly what is the nature of this accreditation, because I really don't understand what they mean by accreditation. And even you would understand. You see, when I mentioned earlier that I think this whole thing seems to be an afterthought. You must understand that from the perspective of what it is the minister designates today said, that right from onset, this was not going to be a government project, but it was going to be a private sector-driven project. Now, even as you recall that in the very first budget presentation, the Minister of Finance, in presenting the budget, stated that about 454 million Ghana cedis was made available in that budget of the year 2017. And that amount of money was set aside for the 1D1F project. That's 454 million Ghana cedis. And in the current budget, that's the year 2018 budget, another amount of about 430 million or so was allocated. Now you look at the two together, we are looking at over almost about 900 million, approaching 1 billion Ghana cedis. Now, why would the government allocate such huge resource coming out of the taxes of the people of Ghana onto a project which is supposed to be one of the flagship projects, if the government did not intend for its own direct resources to be going to making this flagship project become a reality? So what had happened to that money anyhow? Because at the end of the first year, clearly whatever hundreds of millions were allocated were never put to any use. As you rightly stated, the president himself stated that by sometime October last year, about 54 or 56 or so were going to be ready. They never saw the light of day. For the president to have stated that 54, 56 were going to be ready, he was obviously speaking on the back of the amount of money that had been put aside in the budget, which money was meant to have facilitated those 54, 56 that the president was talking about. So you can see that obviously there is some serious confusion here. What it is they sought to do from the beginning, they clearly have hit a cul-de-sac. So they are now doing a U-turn and changing the modus in order to now tell us that, okay, it's not really government anymore. So it means that all the massive allocations that have been done in the budget now have to be completely forgotten about. We're now looking at raising money now from the banks in order to be able to make this happen. So right from the onset, you can see clearly, that's what I mean by this. They've just yeah?
But on that point of government allocations, we know that government is facilitating the process, which sometimes will include government allocating, say, land for it. That can come with cost implications, right? I mean, and if a factory is supposed to be sited at the place
once you make an allocation within the budget, it means you actually are dedicating direct resource. So this is not about collateralizing some land value. This is money that actually is being taken from the money that has been appropriated in the budget, set aside for this project.
Interesting. I want you to
So,
hold
I
on.
mean, what happened to that money?
That is a fundamental question that we'll be probing shortly. And thankfully, we're just also joining on Skype right now by Franklin Kojo. And I read his piece to you at the top of the hour. He had written about this today. Of course, has monitored it very closely. President of Imani. Franklin, thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express. Your position, I read earlier for our viewers, is that you've heard what has been said today, but you were asking questions about in fact, you created a distinction between accreditation and what is actually ready and producing stuff. You've asked the question, and that's a question we've asked also. We're still trying to see if we can get some clarity from government what accreditation means. I mean, from where you sit, what is the best possible guess you can surmise what this accreditation means?
Well, good evening to Evans. Good evening to Fifi. Can you hear me, by the way?
I can hear loud and clear, sir.
All right. Well, so good evening to your viewers as well. Well, first of all, I mean, the changing narratives in this particular enterprise is not necessarily new. As I intimated, the fact of the matter is that most of our politicians usually do not plan ahead. And sometimes when the warning signs are all over, they seem not to listen properly. Fact of the matter is that what the Honorable Designated Minister for Information suggested is what plainly and in simple English would mean that preparation ought to be done. The semantics on accreditation, whatever the word really means, is really neither here nor there. What essentially it means is, look, people have to be ready before they do proper investments. And for me, my default position in all of this narrative has been that if the economic environment wills it, you probably don't even have to do anything beyond, of course, if you really want to do anything. That means you would have just decided that you want to give people some maybe electricity, road access, and what have you. But you see, factories are located based on needs and based on, I mean, the pull factors for factories are not given by government fiat. And I thought that this was quite elementary in the beginning of this discourse. So if we are saying that they are yet to be ready, which is the narrative we've been hearing from day one, but now the narrative is shifted to an accreditation. I don't know whether an accreditation board for factories is going to be set, but be that as it may, my common understanding is that it is the case that they may not be getting significant buy-ins from just anybody, and they have to do a number of reviews, because we kept hearing 332 factories that have been shortlisted, sometimes here 600. There was a time we had 51 by 2017. Then in 2017, we were told that by June 2017, 10 will be ready for launching. If today we are hearing 18 and then 70, as I said, I don't know whether we are trying our hands on the wheels of fortune, but it doesn't seem to me to be a very good narrative. I would suggest to the president and the team and the government to simply look out for factories that are probably struggling already, and then decide to give them what help they could. In any case, look, there are factories that are springing up that do not necessarily need government support. I can give you an example of a steel factory which was recently launched, I think. All they needed and all the interventions they saw, the opportunity they saw was that electricity prices have gone down, and then they decided to take advantage of it. Nobody went to tell them to do the mathematics. What this is beginning to sound and look like is that because we have promised to do something with the private sector, willy-nilly, we have to keep announcing numbers. You can't legislate factories into being. Factories have to decide people have to decide where they want to put factories. And it's true that if the government says they didn't promise a factory everywhere, it's actually coming to the realization that propaganda during elections does not equate to reality. So for me, same old same music.
Let's interrogate that last bit you said about, and this is a real controversial bit today, which is that they didn't promise to have factories in every district. I want us to read the text of the manifesto promise. And Mr. Kweti, I want to throw this to you because that is a really controversial one. If you read the text of the manifesto, it actually didn't say that they will have one factory in every district. The text of the manifesto says, quote, in collaboration with the private sector, the MPP will implement the One District, One Factory initiative. And this is an important bit. This district industrialization program will ensure an even spatial spread of industries. Even spatial spread of industries. And they will say that even spatial spread doesn't necessarily mean one district in every, one factory in every district, which is 216 of them. What's your reading of that? Mr.
Is this for me?
Mr. Kweti, let me put that to Mr. Kweti.
Yeah, Evans, thank you very much. Evans, it's not just within the manifesto that you know what the intentions are. You should recall the manifesto is a very limited document and cannot be so exhaustive. You cannot, for example, devote the whole manifesto to the concept of 1D, 1F. So what you do is to put that particular concept in a very concise form. But if you want to know exactly the full idea behind it, you need to therefore listen to the key individuals who have been speaking to this. And across, throughout the time of the campaign, both at the level of the candidate Nana Akufo-Addo and the vice presidential candidate Bawumia and all the other people who were the main speakers for the NPP, they emphasize again and again that in every district in Ghana, they will establish a factory. And that is not an issue of debate at all. Even on the floor of parliament, that has come up severally, and there is no ambiguity, there's no ambivalence. Everybody in Ghana heard it clearly that they mean in every district there will be a factory.
I see. Franklin, what's your take on that? If you look at the strict text of the manifesto and what we just said, Fifi explained there, what's your stance on this? Should we hold government necessarily to say we want it in all 216, or we should look at the manifesto and say and agree with what some have argued in government that we never promised to have it in all 216?
Well, first of all, the text you read is obvious. If there is anybody suggest to you that an even spread of factories and as part of an industrialization program actually does mean that you'd ensure that as much cover for the country in terms of districts will be covered under one district, one factory. This is plain English. There can be no semantics about it. In any case, the government's own website, which is the Ghana official government website, says one district, one factory officially takes up. That is still there. And it says that the one district, one factory program is aimed at establishing one factory or enterprise in each of the 216 districts of Ghana as a means of creating economic growth pools. So there you have it. I do not.
We seem to have lost Franklin shortly there, but what he was quoting there is important, and I want to quickly read that to Mr. Kweti because he's still with us from his home. And it says that, and in fact, it's on the Government of Ghana website, and it comes with the title, One District, One Factory officially takes off. And I want to quickly read it. It says, President Nana Akufo-Addo has inaugurated the One District, One Factory initiative, kick-starting a policy set to ignite Ghana's industrialization and set her on a course for socio-economic development. And it says, the One District, One Factory program is aimed at establishing at least one factory or enterprise in each of the 216 districts of Ghana as a means of creating economic growth poles that would accelerate the development of those areas and create jobs for the teeming youth. Now, that is the government's own website. But today we heard from the Information Minister emphasize a bit about even spread, as was captured in the manifesto of the party. Fifi, this is the government's own website. Your reaction to it?
I mean, for me, it just confirms what I told you right from the word go. That the first shot, and later realized that the bullet was going the wrong way. So now they are trying hard to aim after they have done the shooting. So that's why, for example, you heard him claim that right from onset, they did not intend it to be a government initiative. Meanwhile, all along on the campaign trail, they kept saying that we will establish in every district of Ghana one factory to employ the youth of Ghana. And the young people actually were taking, believe it, and came out in their numbers to vote for them. And then 1 year passed. The president said he was going to do at least 54. That year passed, nothing was done. We are now in October, 2 months ago. Suddenly, they now do a U-turn and tell us that, oh, really is no more government, it's now going to be private sector. Then the second one is what you just mentioned, trying to now redefine the whole thing now. It's no more one factory in every district. It's now an issue of special distribution. You see exactly what a con job is. This is nothing but a con job that they are doing on the people of Ghana. This is just a simple con job. That they have realized that they have beaten far more than they can chew. So what are they doing? They are doing what you call very subtle maneuvers, hoping that somehow they can throw some dust into the eyes of the people. What you need to do is simply to eat the humble pie. Simple. Eat the humble pie. That you have promised something that you knew you could not do. Because for me, even what is worrying Evans is not even the fact that they clearly are in a quandary. What is more difficult is that as out of what you call stubbornness, they are going to force to try to do this. And do you know what is going to result? Exactly what happened the last time when the MPP was in power, when they actually went setting up a number of these same concerns. At the time, they called them presidential special initiatives. What are those special initiatives today? Every single one of them have gone down the drain. So as far as I'm concerned, even much more worrying than even the whole con job that has been done is the greater worry about the fact that they are going to literally sink precious resources down the drain. Because, you know, Evans?
Mm-hmm. Yes, tell me.
Industrialization is something that the private sector people have the capacity to do themselves. They don't need government to tell them which district they should go and set up any factory.
But government must facilitate that process.
Throughout all these years, if there was an incentive in any of those places, private sector people themselves would have moved into those situations and gotten money and get the job done. Because obviously there must be viable opportunities. There must be good reasons why they want to site in any place. They must see that in those places they will be able to make good money, make profit, and then be able to be in business.
But Mr. Kwete, the retort to that is, if that is as simple as you put it, then we should be way on our way to being industrialized as a country. But because that isn't as simple, is the reason why you need a deliberate government policy such as a one district, one regardless of all the difficulties that the government admittedly is having with it, to guide the process going forward. True?
No. What you actually need is to have the economic conditions that will incentivize people to find those opportunities themselves and make money in doing so. You don't, for example, determine for a private sector person that he should come, let's say, to Ketu South constituency and come and set up a factory. The private sector person, having scoped the horizon, himself knows that, listen, if I'm able to set up this particular factory in Ketu South, given the number of what you call incentives that already are in place, because don't forget, the incentives are already there. When, for example, you cite factories in certain locations that are away from what you call the big urban centers of Accra, Kumasi, and the capital, there are already tax incentives. So it's not like we are now coming to set those in motion. They're already there. Now, so if they already are not doing so, it could only mean because the real conditions do not call for that as far as they are concerned. Because don't you forget that even people who are in Accra, you speak, for example, to members of the Association of Ghana Industries, and they will tell you The biggest concern they tell you up to today has to do with the cost of credit and also access to credit. And the next one they will tell you is that they are fighting what you call the wave of importation, which is making it difficult for them to survive. Because they now have to be competing with relatively cheaper products that are actually flooding our country. Now, we are talking about government that last year when they came into office, one of the first things they did was to reduce what you call import duties. Some of them actually, they said they were waiving them. And what you were doing effectively was to opening the country to even much more importation. And so in one breath, you are making import to actually come into our country much easier. And then the other breath, you're actually claiming that you want to industrialize the country. Meanwhile, the real concerns that already are here are struggling to survive, largely because they are fighting this same, what you call, flooding of import into our country. So that's why I'm telling you that there is absolute confusion here.
But just
they actually are confused.
There's some facts that we're learning today from the briefing. And this is just talking about creating the enabling environment. Government today has updated us with the information that because of its facilitation, banks have made available loanable funds to the tune of 4 billion cedis to these factories that, of course, they will vet and make these funds available. Isn't that something that should be applauded? With that government intervention, that would never have been available to these factories that you talk of?
Even the question is this. What do you think is going to give assurance to these banks, especially in a time where the banking sector is in all kinds of difficulty? Many of these banks are having challenges relating to high non-performing loans. Many of these banks, as you know, have had issues with really supporting the real productive sector of our economy. What is going to give them an incentive today to want to put money into concerns that actually are now going to be startups, if you call it so? If they are unable to support the existing ones, if the existing ones are having problem accessing credit from them, existing ones are unable to get credit at relatively what you call lower interest rates, what is government doing that is giving those banks now comfort to want to put as much as 4 billion, as you are saying? It can only be one thing. That some way, somehow, government must be giving them a solemn pledge in the form of a government guarantee. Now, if a government guarantee is involved, then effectively this actually is virtually a government project. Because when any of these projects goes down, government would have to cough that money in order to make sure that the banks do not lose. So we need to again interrogate how exactly is this happening? Because if the banks are ready to put as much as 4 billion, the same banks that are having issues with making these monies available to the existing productive sector, many of these companies that are already in existence have actually been here for years. They may not necessarily be all profitable, but clearly they've been in business. And they've been asking for more support. They've been asking for ways in which they can get access to cheaper credit and so on. If these banks are not willing to do so, but are willing to make it available for this particular flagship project, it can only be because government is giving guarantee. And if government is giving guarantee, even what I want to tell you is simple, that it means effectively government is the one that's going to be doing this whole project. Because any of those projects, when there is a problem, government will have to look for the funding.
Let me quickly bring in Franklin Kojo, who's back with us on Skype. Franklin, fundamental question. Should the government step away from this and simply leave the private sector to do it?
Well, a straightforward answer is no. Can you hear me?
I can hear loud and clear, yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not using my phone, so there's a feedback. In any case, the straightforward answer to your question is quite no, and I don't think the government would like to do that. What must happen, though, is whether the 4 billion that is still being mobilized, would have some real value addition to whoever is going to take up these loans in order to get onto the program. As always, is the nature of the economy that decides. I can understand why government may want to say that, look, we have gone into talks with some companies or some banks, financial institutions, to give you loans at rates that are quite competitive. That could be one part of the solution. But the other challenge really has to do with exactly what these factories are likely or would be producing. Because in all of this conversation, I haven't seen the grand plan in terms of the demand that would be there, that actually exists for whatever will be produced. That's not to say that certain things can be done. I think the first we heard of was some pineapple related factory that we heard must have been the first of these 1D, 1F. But I asked myself one question: why would anybody want to give some funds to anyone who wants to set up some pineapple juice making factory when Blue Skies is in this country scouting for many is it ounces or tons of pineapples, but has to go to Latin America to go and import these? I would have thought that the way I would use my money is to ensure that the agricultural program of the government, the one, what's it called, the one planting for food and jobs, would go into these low-hanging fruit sectors and then provide enormous opportunity for farmer-based groups that will feed directly the likes of Blue Skies and any other existing entities that produce juice. I don't see the method and the scientific and economic rationale to support any new juice-making factory that would have to contend with looking for markets, compete with the existing ones that are struggling already because their cost of capital, cost of production is high. And then they may have to now, on top of that, they have to look for a lot of resources. So yes, a part of me says that, well, government needs to engage the banking sector to provide what Fifi Kwete talks about as a guarantee. Because when you do that, there could be it's a two-part guarantee. One, guaranteeing that, well, listen, these guys are likely to be productive, so give them some reprieve. But that must be flying against the entire economic environment that also ought to be dealt with. Point we are making, and I think the general point people are making really is that nobody is against erecting factories all over the place. You can spread them like confetti. The fact of the matter is that there must be some method to it. What are you producing? What's the uptake, really? I mean, those are the questions I'll ask, even if I'm a bank. And those banks that are in cahoots with governments who are happily announcing packages and all of that, they should actually go a step further to tell us exactly what support and what plans they have, mitigation plans they have, in case these factories do not return the promise that they seem to be, we seem to be hearing.
Yeah.
And that we haven't heard at all, which is what I suspect Fifi might be suggesting, that if we do not understand what accreditation means, it could actually also mean that there's a fallback plan, which would mean government may have to guarantee. The last of what we want to hear in this enterprise of banks that have collapsed, banks that were forced to collapse, is to wait for another wave of, what I call deliberate government interventions that were not supposed to have occurred in the first place because there were shocks that were created by governments. I think government should be wary, and nobody is forcing them to by all means put a factory in every district. But the districts are no longer 216, right?
Yeah, and
yeah, so.
And of course, because of course we know that more has been added, and so we have to that even increases the burden a bit more.
Yeah, you see, I suspect in government communication, and I have advice for them. I think they should be cautious suggesting that we didn't say that we'll put a factory in every district, because that has depressing outcomes electorally. Because people may be waiting for, factories because of what they heard. If you are now suggesting that, well, you promise something, but it is liberal or literal translation that seems to have been be in abeyance. Well, your your constituents do not understand that. And I'm not supposed to be saying what the constituents will say. I'm only looking at the quantification of that particular promise, irrespective of whether it's be delivered by a private sector or as a combination of private sector and the state. Let factories grow by themselves. We can't legislate factories into being. It's like money. The color of money obviously doesn't matter when you're dealing with the value it has to add to it in order to multiply its impact.
And we would take a short commercial break. When we return, Fifi Kwete will answer the question, what should government do with the 1D, 1F now? Does he, by the way, support the concept? If he does, how can government make it work? We'll deal with that when we return from the short break. Stay with us. So listen to PM Express here on the JoyNews channel. My name is Evans Mensah. I have with me Fifi Kwete, who is the ranking member on the Trade Committee in Parliament. He's also a MP for K2 and has been speaking to us about the One District, One Factory. Also with me on the telephone on Skype is the president of Imani Africa, Franklin Kojo. Mr. Kwete, let me ask you this. Do you or do you not support the policy at least to create one factory in every district?
I support any initiative that will bring sustainable jobs to the people of Ghana.
Doesn't this bring sustainable jobs? Wouldn't this bring sustainable jobs?
I think we should understand that it's upon the old that you build the new. Okay, that's a saying among my people, that you build the new on the old. So the existing industry in the country, which already are having challenges, what you want to do first and foremost is to see how you can address those challenges. We are talking today about so many companies that are struggling. We are talking about last year, at the end of the year 2017, a company like Sonitra, at the beginning of the year, were employing about 1,000 people. And by the close of the year 2017, their own stated situation was that they had come down from 1,000 workers down to about 50 workers, that within a space of 1 year. And I'm sure it's not just limited to Sonitra. I'm sure you are quite aware of a number of companies today that are actually laying off workers, because they are struggling as a result of the conditions, the economic conditions that we face. Now, what you do as a government is to see how you can address these serious challenges first and foremost. That would ensure that the companies that are in existence themselves are strong enough to employ many more people. Then new companies look at what is happening to the old and are inspired. And on the basis of that inspiration, knowing that this is a fertile ground where you can actually be profitable and be able to make sustainable business, they themselves will assess facilities. Whether those facilities are coming from Exim Bank, which is relatively cheaper, or they are going to have, or government now works with them to see how facilities that will be what you call relatively cheaper will be assessed by them. You can see this is more structural in nature. As opposed to this is simply what you call a contrived situation. The worry about this is that this is nothing but simply political vote catching move. And it will simply amount to nothing, because the intention right from the word-go was not to be able to do anything sustainable. It was simply to do something that you hope can get you vote at the end of the year 2020. That was cited the previous example of presidential special initiatives, which also were touted in an age where we're talking about golden age of industry. At the end of the day, every single one of them came down. Because if the only reason why you do what you do is simply to throw dust and hoping to get vote out of air, the foundations already are weak and they cannot survive.
Let me quickly ask.
Our view is that first you look at the conditions of the ground to ensure that those who are working now as current industry, companies like Sonitra and other companies themselves are able to survive. They're able to rise to be able to combat the flood of importation in order to be able to expand.
Yeah.
And on the basis of that, other companies will take inspiration, and then more production can happen.
Very quickly, you've mentioned that monies were allocated to 1D, 1F. You haven't seen anything about that. You've also raised many concerns about it. As a ranking member on the Trade Committee, is this something that Parliament will be resuming soon? Is this something they want to take up in Parliament and your committee level?
Oh, definitely so. Especially now that we are getting a whole new redefinition of the whole 1D, 1F.
Okay.
That one is not actually meant for every district in the country. And two, is really never was intended to be a government-funded project, but was supposed to all along be private sector funded. Then clearly we are going to raise those concerns and ask them, why did you come to Parliament for 2 successive years and huge monies were allocated in the budget for the purposes of setting up factories in various districts in Ghana?
And Mr. Franklin Cudjoe, your final thoughts on this. You've already laid out a roadmap how you think government should approach this. Going forward, but they have 2 years to go, and this is a political promise. You say they should not back away from it. How will they make it this work then?
Well, they shouldn't back away. But secondly, they should ensure that in 2019, as there's been some promise that the whole country will be littered with infrastructure-related projects, they should be cautious not creating moribund, erect mini moribund factories that may die off immediately after the elections, because that we cannot countenance, because that will cost a lot more than the original plans. I suspect the other point I need to make quickly is that the government needs to take a complete 360-degree view of the entire economy. So while they may be compartmentalizing the whole intervention process behind 1D, 1F, as in getting cheap credit, they should also understand that these factories, when they are eventually erected, will still source materials on the economy, an economy where taxes already, wherever permutations have been done on the taxes, still point to the fact that the cost of doing business is actually high.
Okay.
So they should correct those, and that would see them through.
I'm grateful that you joined us. President of Imani Africa, Franklin Cudjoe. They're also joining us live from his home is Fifi Kwete, who speaks for the minority on trade. He's also the minority ranking on the Trade Committee in Parliament. Mr. Kwete, I'm grateful that you joined us live from your home. And for those who watched us on the JoyNews channel, have a good evening.